And if you head to the site, you'll see that the cover image for the Week 13 waiver wire is none other than Pat Freiermuth, because the offensive coordinator's change for the Steelers this past week resulted in Freiermuth earning a season-high 34.2% target share and 48% route rate from the slot. For reference, under Matt Canada, Freiermuth was at a 34% slot rate, which was 38th among all tight ends. Not creative, not surprisingly. And I don't think it's sustainable, for the record, because TJ Hawkinson is currently leading his position with a 24.5% target share, a full 10 percentage points lower than Freiermuth's involvement this past week. But it's a volatile position, so it's worth chasing from that alone. And in the short term, with Hawkinson, Dalton Kincaid, Isaiah Likely, and Cole Kmet all on bye this week, it's worth noting that Arizona's defense has allowed 4 different tight ends to reach double-digit PPR points since Week 8. Freiermuth, if even to simply pad for those starters ahead of him, is certainly worth chasing. Running backs have been stripped bare, and there isn't a single starter available to you on the waiver wire. But I do think D'Ernest Johnson's interesting, because not only did he record a 42-yard reception when coming off the bench for Etienne, who was injured and later returned in game, that makes 7 touches, at least in back-to-back games for D'Ernest, and 28 receiving yards in 3 consecutive appearances. And right now, the team's coaching staff has clearly been limiting Etienne whenever they can. He's handled less than 60% of their backfield touches in 2 of their 3 games out of the bye. And this past week, even getting D'Ernest Johnson involved for those aforementioned 7 touches and 1 more to Tank Bigsby. And I think it's because not only trying to keep Etienne healthy and for a potential playoff run, but also Etienne has been inefficient and living off wearing touchdown deodorant. Over his last 6 games, he's averaged 3.3 yards per carry. And so given the Jacksonville's upcoming schedule against the Bengals and Jake Browning, and then the Browns and whoever the hell they want to throw at quarterback, we can see potential blowout scenarios in those 2 contests, getting D'Ernest Johnson there in the second half for any teams that are desperate for running back options to plug in off the waiver wire. Another player I don't mind plugging in this week at receiver is Curtis Samuel, because he did pop on Thanksgiving in front of the world for a season-high 27.2% target share. And it's because he was peppered underneath to avoid sacks for Sam Howell. 67% of Samuel's targets came within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. But that's an approach we can expect this upcoming week 2 against the Dolphins, as the Commanders are 9.5-point home dogs expected to stay in negative game script, and Miami ranks 6th in the league in pressure rate. We think Howell will yet again continue trying to get the ball out of his hands quickly, and we think they're going to pass a lot, as they've shown us throughout the year, because they can't compete with Miami. If that's the case, Samuel will once again get hammered targets as a flex option available immediately to you. As for a long-term option behind Curtis Samuel, I'm still interested in Greg Dortch, because last week when we talked about him, because he led the Cardinals with a team-high 27.5% target share, we simply chalked it up to Michael Wilson and Zach Pascal being out and thought Dortch would be removed from the offense once either of them returned. But that wasn't the case. Even with Pascal back on Sunday, he ran just 5 routes, and Dortch played in 2 wide sets and mirrored Rondale Moore in routes run. And now in their last 2 games, Dortch is out-targeted Moore 17-4. I don't know when Wilson will return, since he suffered a setback ahead of Week 11 on Friday and then didn't practice at any point last week. But there's a real chance Dortch sticks in this offense no matter what for the rest of the season, since he's earning targets and has now recorded at least 11.7 PPR points in back-to-back games. For some deep cuts for everyone, Jalin Hyatt is on bye this upcoming week. What we saw from him, from Tommy DeVito against the Patriots, was enough to prioritize him if you don't need a starter immediately, like Samuel or Dortch. because Darius Slayton went into the week as doubtful, but he ended up playing, and Hyatt still played in 2 wide sets overing him, finishing second on the Giants in routes run and earning a season-high 25% target share for it, going over 100 receiving yards. Not only is Hyatt a rookie expected to get a post-bye bump from week 14 on, but when the Giants return, and they've shown they are a viable passing offense whenever it's Tyrod Taylor or Tommy DeVito under center, the Giants will return to the Packers, Saints, and Eagles and Rams through the fantasy playoffs. It's actually a tremendous schedule for Hyatt and the team's passing attack, assuming it's one of those 2 quarterbacks under center for them. So Hyatt stashing him everywhere, especially in 12, 14-team leagues for a potential playoff explosion. Justin Watson's also interesting because the unthinkable happened this past week against the Raiders. Not only did Rashee Rice record a season high in route participation on over 70% of the Patrick Mahomes' dropbacks and finished with a season high target share for it, but Justin Watson stayed in 2 wide sets as the team simply moved Marquez Valdes-Scantling back to the 3rd receiver in their rotation, something that didn't happen all year long to that point. So if it's now Rashee Rice and Justin Watson, who are the team's 2 wide sets for Mahomes, I'm certainly interested in Watson for the fantasy playoffs as well, despite the fact he only earned 3 targets and came down with 1 catch for that touchdown this past game. Speaking of deeper running backs, Royce Freeman is an interesting stash too, because 10 of his 13 carries against the Cardinals this past week came in the first 3 quarters, as in Kyren Williams' first game back, the approach was to rotate Freeman and Kyren on alternating drives. And Freeman's 40% share of the team's running back carries this past week, I don't expect to grow because, again, that was Kyren returning from injury, and we only expect his usage to get larger moving forward. Having said that, if we think the Rams will either be in blowout situations as their running game is now consistent and impactful with Kyren Williams back in the helm, and Freeman being the lone contingency player since the team doesn't use Zach Evans, then we think Freeman is there in place of Darrell Henderson since he was waived before the week and could eventually become a contingency player that we stash among the other guys like Rico Dowdle, Tyler Algier. The list goes on, just to be ahead of any Kyren Williams injury in the fantasy playoffs. And finally, for those who do not have Pat Freiermuth available in your leagues and are still grasping for straws to replace tight end, Juwan Johnson is also interesting because since he returned from injury in his last 4 games, he's 15th in route participation among all tight ends. And that includes Foster Moreau and Taysom Hill, both being involved as well. Not only that, but with the Saints battling injuries all over their offense. Jamal Williams banged up, Rashid Shaheed not going to play in week 13 with his quad injury, and I'm not expecting Chris Olave to play following his concussion this past game. The ball obviously has to go somewhere against this poor Lions defense. And that offers Juwan Johnson a chance to spike opportunity wherever you're desperate for a tight end. With that being said, the rest of the week 13 waiver wire and any other plug and play options you need for this 6-team bye week are available at 4for4.com for everyone right now. We will be back on Thursday, per usual, with our preview show and normal schedule, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you next time.